Okay, perfect. So, testing and admissions. I got a little PowerPoint for you. Couple of things here that I think are really, really important. So important that I'm doing everything I can to communicate it to everyone that I know who's in this boat. All right, so first up, scores matter. Okay, test scores matter. This is the new normal. This is the new insight that I have for you. All right. What you have to understand is this, is that test optional was always a lie. Test optional was a lie the whole time. They were making it up. If you submitted your application test optional, you're like 4 times less likely to get in than someone with a good test score. So this idea that it's test optional was completely lunacy from the beginning, and now we know that for sure. We know it. There's evidence. Standardized test scores are a much better predictor of academic success than high school grades. This isn't me saying this. This is the president of Brown University. Just getting straight A's is not enough information for us to know whether the students are going to succeed or not. This isn't me saying this. This is the dean of admissions at MIT. But here's really the one that absolutely captures everything that's going on. Even though admissions offices across the country know that test scores are valuable, they can't bring back tests because it's not politically correct. Now, I could have told you that 3 years ago, but it's not me saying that. This is the dean at Georgetown, the dean of admissions at Georgetown. So what does all this mean? It means that test scores matter. Test scores matter. When you've got all of those quotes came from a New York Times article. The New York Times, when you get something like that, when you combine it with the Supreme Court rulings that have ended affirmative action in education, as well as everywhere else for that matter, it means that the admissions landscape has totally changed. It's a totally different admissions landscape than it was even a year ago. Test optional is not an option. Test optional is not an option. If you're trying to get into a selective school, test optional is not an option. If you're going test optional, there's absolutely no reason to do anything related to test preparation. Don't take the SAT. Don't take the ACT. If that's the route you're going, don't bother. It's fine. You can do it that way. If you don't care about getting into a selective school, why bother taking the test? But if it does matter to you where you go to college, then you're going to need a test score. And check this out, okay? So this is an important piece of information. If you're applying to a selective school and you do not submit a score, then the average score that they will assign to you is about a 1300. Okay, about a 1300. So what this means is, even if you get a 1350 and you're applying to a very, very selective school, you might say, oh my God, that's below their median. It doesn't matter. Because if you don't submit a score, they're going to count you as having a 1300. So for everyone who's looking for the selective schools, if you're looking at Ivy Plus, or even really a tough in-state school like a UVA, if you get a decent score, you got to submit it. Don't say, oh, well, the median is 1450, but I only had a 1440, so I'm not going to submit. No, you got to submit your scores. There is no such thing as test optional. That's the rule. That's the insight. And then finally, this is a little bit coming down the pike. You guys will probably encounter this. So far, Notre Dame has changed. They're the first ones that I know of to call it test expected, not test optional, not test required, but test expected. Now, of course, absolutely positively, there should be no doubt in your mind that when you see test expected, right? What does that mean? Test expected means test required. Get used to it. This is not going to be the last school that switches from test optional to test expected. Okay. Just to run through all this, because I don't know how much of this you know already. You're going to take the test on your laptop at school. You're going to take the test on your laptop at school. You won't be able to open any other applications. You will be able to use Desmos. You have to, sorry. Okay, you have to, you have to take care of your own charging. Okay, always be charging. Always be charging. Make sure you're charged before you go. Make sure you charge during breaks. Bring a, charge block, whatever you need. Don't run out of power. You're responsible for that. Bring a pencil. Bring pencils, because they're going to give you paper. You can't bring your own paper. You can't bring your own notebook. Test is adapted. What that means is your second math section and your second verbal section depend upon how you did on the first section. If you score well on the first section, they give you a harder second math or a harder second English. If you score poorly on the first section, they give you the easier second math and the easier second English. And if you get the easier test, if you get the easier second test, you really can't get much higher than a 600 to a 650. So you got to do well in that first section. That's the key. Questions are weighted. So this is different from how it used to be. It used to be that all questions were worth the same amount of points. Okay? Now the hard questions are worth more points than the easy ones. This does not change our approach, because you are already moving quickly through the easy questions. That's what I teach you. That's what we've been working on. Sentence completions, notes. What was the other one? It's English, all of the English. Once you know those rules, it really speeds you up. And so, yeah, there'll be some problems where there's like a long reading passage, a relatively long reading passage, and it's complicated and hard. Sure, those are going to take a little while. But you're going to have time for those. You're going to have time for the hard questions because you sucked up all the easy ones real quickly. That's the idea. Okay. So you already know this. The reading and the English passages are short compared to the old test. The math questions are very similar to the old SAT, but Desmos. And we're going to be doing more work on Desmos this week to show you how to get some of the hardest questions. Vocab. You got to know your vocabulary. And that's why we are reintroducing, we are bringing it back, Vocab Lab. This will be in April, starting in April, Wednesdays at 8 p.m. The best possible way to increase your vocabulary. The only way to see new questions is by taking the test. Okay, let me just talk about this real quick. It used to be, and in fact, I embarrassingly, I sent out an email a few weeks ago saying that you could order a copy of your test from the SAT. I was wrong. I got that completely wrong. That's outdated information. The thing is, with this test, they're not going to be releasing any of the questions. You will not be able to go back and see your actual test that you took and see the actual answer choices and see the actual answer choice that you put. That no longer exists. It used to, but it doesn't. Now, you can still do that for the ACT. You can still do that for the ACT. And if you're considering the ACT, you got to be in the April test. That's the test. You got to take the April ACT. I have a course for the April ACT. Okay. Last thing. Related to what I just said is this. Okay. There's going to be more school day testing. This means you take the test on like a Monday or a Tuesday or a Wednesday at school during the school day, not on a Saturday. This is becoming more and more common. I will not have classes that are specifically aligned to those dates because every school does it on a different day. It's anywhere in March or April that they could do this stuff. But it's important that you take those tests because those in-school tests will offer you an extra way to see new questions. The only way to see new questions is by taking the test. Those in-school test days, even if we don't have a special prep for them, they're still very valuable because you'll get to see more questions. And of course, you always will have an opportunity to increase your super score. Every time you take the test, you've got a chance to increase your super score. Maybe you don't get your highest score overall, but maybe you go up a couple of points on the verbal, or you go up a couple of points on the math. Once you do that, that is added to your super score. Your super score is your very best math score out of all of the times you took the test, combined with your very best verbal score out of all the times that you took the test. Every time you take the test, you have a chance to increase your verbal score. Your super score. You must take the test multiple times. I cannot emphasize this enough. If you're expecting to be done on March 9th, you are kidding yourself. All right, last thing. Real quick on SAT versus ACT, okay? So you can see I've got all the dates there. Whatever you do, do not order anything from SAT or from ACT that is titled score report. If you order the score report, you're getting nothing. Nothing. Do not order the score report. There is nothing that you can order for the SAT. Nothing. Don't order anything. For the ACT, you can get that, but you can only get it for the April, the June. Oh, this is a mistake. And it should say for the September. The April, the June, and the September. I don't know how that. Okay. Yeah, they changed it. So if you're taking the April ACT, like I recommend all my students, any juniors who are considering taking the ACT, you want to take the April test. You can get back your whole test. You can see every question. You can see the questions, the answers that you put down, and you can see the correct answers. This is the very best diagnostic we have. So keep that in mind. If you're really interested in diving deep, you're going to need to try the ACT. Next. All right, pros. ACT rewards the grinders, the students who are high on the academics but low on the test scores. If your GPA is a 4.3 plus and you crush it in every class, but somehow you can't get over a 600 on the math or a 600 on the English, maybe you should try the ACT. Second, like I just said, ACT offers you the test information release service. That's when you can get the copy of the test that I was just talking about. SAT is a familiar test. That's the #1 pro because everybody in this region, everybody on the East Coast, is taking the PSAT as a sophomore and as a junior. And everyone who took the PSAT as a junior, which was everyone, already saw the digital SAT, because the digital PSAT and the digital SAT are the exact same thing. So you're familiar with it already. And this is a big one. Dang, it's a shorter test. That makes a big difference for people. The difference between a 3-hour and 15-minute test and a 2.5-hour test, that's a significant difference. And then finally, I put this down under pros. Is it? Is it a pro? For some students, taking the test on the computer instead of pencil or paper will be a pro. That'll be something that they like. That'll be a benefit. Like, yeah, I'd rather do it that way. For some, it won't be. And that's going to be a 100% individual thing. Don't sign up for the essays. Do not sign up for the essays. Cons. The number one issue for students taking the ACT is that there's not enough time. That's what I hear more than anything else. Okay. And of course, what you need to know about that, is it's not actually true. Now, if you haven't had any prep and you try taking the ACT for the first time, you will have an issue with pacing. That's normal. But that's if you don't know what you're doing. Obviously, if you don't know what you're doing, you're not probably going to get your best score. Once you've learned the strategies for how to attack the problems in each section, there will still be you'll still have to hustle to finish the science on time. But that's okay, because you know why? Everyone else does too. Everyone else is in the same boat. It's hard for everybody. Okay? So when it comes to SAT versus ACT, the issue of not enough time is a little bit of a misleading one. This is how I know that a student hasn't gotten any decent preparation. If they're saying, oh, there's just not enough time, that means no one's taught them how to take the test. Okay? Now, this is a very real con for the ACT. This is legit. The math section has a lot of stuff on it that is simply not on the SAT. Conic sections, logarithms, trig graphs. There's stuff on that test, matrices. There's stuff on that test they just don't put on the SAT. So that means that if you really have if you had a good pre-calc teacher, if you had a good Algebra 2 teacher, you're more likely set up for success there. And if you didn't, those skills are still very accessible, because when they ask a high-level skill, like matrix or conic sections, they always ask an easy question. Okay, so you don't need to know those high-level topics really well. You only need to know a little bit of them, and then you're good. But it's a broad. Now, the SAT is not a broad test. It is a deep test. Okay, but for our purposes, the thing that's the most relevant is we don't know what's on this test. We really don't know what's on the SAT. They've given us 4 complete tests. 4 complete tests, okay? That's all I have to work with. I've used almost every single question that is released somewhere in this program. But we don't really know what it's going to look like on test day, okay? So that's a big minus. Hopefully it looks great. It probably will. It probably will. And you're in a really good position if you're taking this test for the first time, okay? Because what history has shown us is that when the College Board releases a new version of the test, usually the first and second administrations of that test, the first 2 times they give it, are very favorable curves. In other words, they want everybody to get a high score the first time around, so that everybody says they love the new SAT. I expect that'll happen this time, so I expect the March test to be a very good test for you to be taking. One last thing to say here, and then we will end up this round. Oh, I was supposed to say this. Hey, gang, there's no shortcuts. There's no shortcuts. What that means is everyone who is in the position of trying to raise their SAT score or their ACT score needs a massive increase. No one comes to me to get a 50-point increase on the SAT. No one. Everyone wants a 250-point increase on the SAT. Everyone. And that can happen. Might get a high score the first time around, so that everybody says they love the new SAT. I expect that'll happen this time, so I expect the March test to be a very good test for you to be taking. One last thing to say here, and then we will end up this round. Oh, I was supposed to say this. Hey, gang, there's no shortcuts. There's no shortcuts. What that means is everyone who is in the position of trying to raise their SAT score or their ACT score needs a massive increase. No one comes to me to get a 50-point increase on the SAT. No one. Everyone wants a 250-point increase on the SAT. Everyone. And that can happen. My shit is legit. But you got to be all in. You've got to be all the way in. And that means psychologically. Primarily, that means psychologically. There is a lot that I can do to help my students succeed. There is a lot that I can do to raise your score. There's a lot that I can give you that's going to make a massive difference. But there is one thing that you have to have that I cannot provide. There's one thing you have got to come to me with if you want to see a breakthrough, if you want to see a massive score increase. You know what that one thing is? Hunger. Hunger. You have to be hungry. I can't make you hungry. I can't make you want it. But if you want it, I can get you there. All right, so what's the verdict here? ACT, more straightforward test. SAT, more of a critical thinking test. That's the biggest difference. If you do good on tests, but not so good on homework assignments, SAT is for you. If you do really good on homework assignments and you get A's on all of your quizzes, on the ones where as long as you study, you'll get an A, ACT is a test for you. Now, that's not 100% of a rule. That's just the guideline, okay? And then finally, really important to remember this. There's no difference between these two tests when it comes to admissions. Anywhere that you could apply with an SAT, you can also apply with an ACT and vice versa. Every school that will take your SAT will take your ACT, and they do not care which one it is. There's no preference to SAT versus ACT in admissions. And then really finally, I know I said this before, but really finally, here are the score breakdowns, okay? So a 1600 on the SAT is the highest score, probably not a surprise to you. On the ACT, a 1300, a 36 is the highest possible score. A couple other benchmarks. A 30 on the ACT corresponds to a 1350 on the SAT, and 1000 on the SAT corresponds to a 19 on the ACT.